Are you interested in learning more about e-commerce? I am so excited to welcome our two guests today from Fisher Green Creative up in South Portland, Maine. We are going to be sharing things with you about how to transition your business online, and if you're already online, the things that you can do to kind of up the ante to make that online shopping experience better, not only for your customers, but for yourself as the user. Hey everybody, it's Kristen Fuhrmann-Simmons, and I am so excited to have the wonderful team behind Fisher Green Creative with me here today to talk about all things e-commerce. Welcome ladies, thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's jump right in because I know so many businesses have had to pivot quickly right now. They're thinking a lot about how do we transition our business to an online business. Some people don't know where to start. Some people have already started. And you two are really bring a lot to the table in terms of your expertise with that. I'd love to have you introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about what you do at Fisher Green Creative. Jenny, we'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Jenny Green, co-owner at Fisher Green Creative. We are a small marketing agency that focuses on website design and development, social media marketing, SEO, and really everything in between. My primary job is to focus on the social media and digital strategy development. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. We're so happy to have you here. And Kathy.
Hi, I'm Kathy Fisher, and I am the other co-owner of Fisher Green Creative. I'm the other half. And my specialty actually is doing the websites, creating the websites, developing and designing, and yeah, setting up the e-commerce. So questions go here.
Wonderful. Well, I really am, again, so happy to have you here because as we mentioned at the very beginning, so many businesses have a lot of questions. They don't know where to turn. And we thought this would be a wonderful opportunity to talk to two experts in this field, not only in the considerations in what to think about when you're getting onto an e-commerce platform, and then Jenny also thinking about how to market yourself once you're on that platform. So if you could jump in, just kind of the first thought, what are some of the important first steps when people are thinking about transitioning their business to an online platform? What are those first things that they need to be thinking about?
I think there are a lot of logistics just to consider when first starting out. Think about how many. I would also say that you probably don't need to bite off the entire store in one chunk. I think just sort of getting up there and getting a few products, a few categories up first, and then letting it evolve over time is probably best, just so you can get things out there to sell. You're going to need to sort of consider the payment methods you're going to use, what you may already use if you have a brick and mortar store. How are you going to get your product out there? Do you have a third-party shipping company you like and already use, or do you need to explore those, or is the post office fine, or maybe you sell digital products, you don't have to ship at all. So just logistics, manpower needed to get your product out there, that sort of thing.
You mentioned a lot of these stores are already going to be having a point of sale system. Are there point of sale systems in their shops that can be easily integrated with e-commerce platforms?
We do have a client who was currently using Square in their site, and well, we have two clients who were doing that, and each of them went separate ways. One went ahead and just set up a Square e-commerce page on their site, and it was very quick. They pivoted very quickly. Fantastic job. And then another has chosen to make e-commerce a more permanent thing, and so they went with a full setup using Square as their payment gateway. And so it does integrate nicely. It really allows them to keep all their inventory control in one place. And they're also exploring gift cards. We've been working with a client called Frost Farms over the past few weeks, and what we did with them is just sort of got things set up, a shell set up very quickly so we could start selling some things the first weekend, and then we keep adding things. So right now we're in the process of adding gift cards and going through Square to see if that's the best way to do it. So they're using their payment platform for several different iterations and several different ways to distribute their products. So.
Kathy, you make a really interesting point in this particular farm, and one of the first points you made was that in transitioning to e-commerce, a store does not need to bite off the entire part of their inventory right when they're going to transition online. And you just mentioned too, you said we added a couple of products at a time. Any tips or ideas about which products to add first when you're talking to a business? I'd love to hear your feedback on that.
Well, in their case, it was they're a garden center up in Mount Desert, and they were just adding the things they had first because it's such a seasonal business.
Sure.
So that we first started with soil amendments, that sort of thing, and then quickly went on to annuals like pansies, because those are the things that you can put in now. But they have been adding things ever since then. For other stores, if you have a brick and mortar store, you might turn to your most popular products first. Or perhaps if you have an agreement, such as one of our other clients, with a vendor who will ship for you, sometimes that's helpful. It's just going to depend on a per case basis, which I think so many things do, because every store is so unique. Just what's going to be the easiest thing for you to get out there first so you can start generating some revenue for your business.
Certainly, and I think that this can range anywhere from a handful of products, say 5 or 10 products first, and really seeing how that goes, because I think giving ourselves the time to understand the learning curve of being on your online platform. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe what you've seen from people? What are the pain points a little bit in that initial learning curve? What are some of the things that people are getting hung up, and how are they getting over that hump?
It's an interesting thing right now with curbside delivery, and I know Frost Farms is offering free delivery within a certain radius, and so establishing that radius has been a little difficult just because zip codes don't always align with the towns that they can deliver to, and so that's one of the things we're sort of fiddling with right now. Ellsworth is in a zip code, but parts of Ellsworth are so far away that they don't qualify.
Right.
With being inside the shipping radius. And so those are little things, but that's come in, I think we're in the beginning of week 4 or the end of week 3 with that site. So these are the finer points that we're working out at this end of things. This isn't something we would have tackled in week 1 at all. The question then was, can we limit your delivery area? And
Got it.
that was the first thing to hop on. So yeah, and again, it's going to be different for everybody, but that's probably the biggest thing that we've had to customize for them.
In looking at that question of delivery and where you can go with your products, you had mentioned a point about using a company like a third-party shipper. So if you have products in your shop that can be shipped from a third party, can you explain what that looks like to people who have our business? So tell me exactly what you're talking about in terms of third-party shipper.
There are companies out there who just specialize in it, and I'm trying really hard to remember some names of them. Mm-hmm. And off the top of my head,
that particular client, Kathy, that you're referring to, that the vendor actually, they were the ones that made the product. So instead of shipping to the store, for the store to then ship out to the customer, you just cut out that step. And so if you have a vendor that would work with you in that respect, it would just make it easier, direct vendor to customer shipping, but you still get the benefit of it without having to worry about that logistic.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that a lot of people are thinking, do I try to sell my products, for example, directly to customers and keep inventory on hand when they necessarily can't get into their store right now, or do they use those third-party shipping methods? So that's something really to consider to make it easier for themselves. Let's come back, though, quickly to that idea of e-commerce and transitioning. When you're working with different types of businesses, a garden center is something where they're shipping. Are they delivering live flowers to the public, or are they shipping them? How is that working? I'm just curious, because I know a lot of businesses that have an actual product that's sort of fresh made, whether it's a restaurant or garden center or something like that, how do they get their products online to be ordered and then delivered to the public? What would be the best methods that you would recommend for that?
We have one client who is a bakery, and they have curbside pickup between, they set a block of hours aside on Saturdays. They have the menu up all week, and they will create everything for you and have it ready for you to pick up on Saturdays. So that's something that works for them with a reduced staff. And again, it depends on how many people you have on hand, what your manpower is like in these uncertain times. And but on the opposite side of that, the garden center, they actually will go and drop things off. So they have the resources to do that. So it's going to look different for everybody depending on their capabilities at this moment, I think.
I think you bring up a really good point, because we've seen some of these smaller businesses who have transitioned online to e-commerce by just collecting orders via their email address, so that people will go on their site and to their email. And that can work well for some businesses, but then we've also had the other folks on the other end of things that say, I don't have the manpower right now to filter through all of the emails that I'm receiving. So how do businesses kind of navigate that challenge? What would the recommendation be? Because it feels so easy right now. If you see something you wanted to order it, email us or call us. But then a lot of businesses are flooded with calls and flooded with emails. How can we kind of take a step back and recommend management of that kind of influx of orders? What would you recommend for those businesses?
I would recommend limiting the number of products online first and ease into things gradually.
Yep.
Don't make, everything that people have seen in your store available for shipment. One, you may not have the inventory, and two, you may not have the manpower. So I would say for sure start small, and then if you feel the next week like you can handle some more, um, or things are starting to change a little bit for you, and you've got a couple extra people available and set up at home, then I would say that would be the time to expand. I would just say that you need to start small. The bakery, for example, doesn't have their full range of pastries and such available. They've sort of whittled it down, and also have put up things very smart: flour, yeast, sugar, things like that they can, things they didn't have before but are in high demand right now. So they've done a great job of scoping the situation and figuring out what people really need. So.
That may be the point of the day, right? To tell people, if anything that you think about or come away from this conversation with is to start small, start manageable, whether you begin in e-commerce by just collecting orders via your email, or you jump into a more complex platform like something like Shopify or BigCommerce, to really start small and something that you can control. I think right now, when a lot of people are trying to make this transition, the idea is to try to replace your regular business revenue quickly. And again, you're going to have a lot more success, it sounds like, if you start on that small basis, master it no matter what you choose to integrate, and then you decide to go bigger. Is that what I'm hearing? I feel like I'm hearing that theme over and over again, and it seems like a really important point for any business right now.
This is a process, and I would treat it as such, with a beginning and a middle, and then, however it ends for a lot of people. I think this is also a great jump for some people who could be selling online in the best of times anyway. So, but again, it's a process, and how it pans out for everyone is going to be a little different. But
it's a great point. Jenny, let me ask you a quick question about messaging, because I'm going to jump sideways a little bit. When businesses are transitioning to an e-commerce platform, what are your suggestions about communication with their audience? Because I know that customers right now are really eager to support their favorite businesses, and sometimes businesses have to send out messaging where it's like, be patient with us. What are some of your recommendations for some of that messaging around this time of transition?
That's a great question, and I really can see from I am not sure what the hours are of Hannaford, and I really need to go grocery shopping because I haven't been. So I'm looking at my own experience. Where would I go to get that messaging? Where do I go to find the updated hours? And then I can turn that around and apply that to any marketing situation, messaging situation where you're answering that pain point. What's the biggest thing that's keeping your customers from shopping or buying right now? And that would be where you need to put that message, and that's how you create the message. So, to really get them over that pain point of not knowing, where to go. So if you can clarify your hours, your timing, what to do, the new shipping methods, and distribute that clearly, concisely, and frequently.
Right.
That's really going to help, get your clients adjusted to the new payment purchasing process.
For sure. So you're recommending that when you said clear, concise, and consistent, I love that. That's the kind of thing that I like to hear. Where are you recommending that businesses are sharing this information? Is it their email lists? Is it their Facebook page? Like, where should this information live?
Anywhere and everywhere.
Okay.
Initially, a lot of people were really concerned about over-saturating but really you can't quite do that enough right now because people are consuming information so quickly and things are changing so quickly that you really need to be everywhere all the time. And that might be a little bit too much pressure, but really you're sending out the emails, you're putting it on your Facebook, you're having something posted on your website, so that way you're hitting everybody where they are.
Are you recommending to businesses that they share that they're in a transition? Because I know sometimes we keep some of our business choices close to our chest in terms of like, okay, this is a back of the house piece of information that we're transitioning online. Are you recommending that in this changing time right now that people share with their customers a little bit more openly and ask for that patience? Because I know a lot of people are straddling that line. How much do we share with our customers about the transitions that we're going through right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always been a firm believer of transparency and being very genuine in our marketing messages. So I think that to that extent, you want to go as far as you can with that.
Yeah.
I don't think that you want to give away business secrets, and I don't think you need to broadcast your bottom line or anything like that. But I do think that you need to be honest in this time, and I think people appreciate. That effort and that genuine, here's where we are, here's what we're doing, and just stick to facts. Try to take that emotion out to some degree, but yet still, you don't want to be tone deaf. But it's a balance. It really is. And I know we've had a lot of clients reach out and ask us about that. What do I say? How do I do it? But it boils back down, in my opinion, to just being transparent, genuine, authentic.
Got it. I think there is a lot of, I don't want to say it's forgiveness right now, but there's a lot of understanding. I think that a lot of consumers really know that businesses are really trying hard to maintain their viability right now, to make those transitions and make those changes. And so I think I absolutely agree with that sentiment that it's okay to be a little bit more vulnerable. You don't have to give up the farm and all your secrets, but it's okay to be vulnerable and let your clients know, you know what, we're making this transition to e-commerce right now, and we really appreciate your patience, and we're learning this as much as you are. So let's talk about that learning point. I want to come back to some of the businesses that you all, if you could share some examples who've had real success with getting onto e-commerce. I'd love to hear some examples of that, and also what they did in terms of working with Fisher Green Creative for that success.
Well, we've mentioned Frost Farms up in Mount Desert, and they've done great. They just finished their third weekend, and again, it was, they noted today that they only have maybe a third of their products listed, and they just continue to add more every day. The seeds were disappearing as quickly as they were adding them last weekend.
Nice.
So it's a pretty cool thing to watch. They've now recouped all the costs through sales of what they spent on the site in less than a month. So I think they're doing amazing work. And I think now they have the site completely paid for, and it will go on to serve them the remainder of the growing season, which isn't even close to its height yet. So I think they're well set for success. And again, they started very small. The first set of items I put up, I think, were 13 items.
Great.
There were well over 100 there now, with many, many more to come. So they're doing a great job, and they did a great job just sort of, okay, this is what we expect for the first weekend. Oh, the weather's not so good. This is what we expect for the second weekend. And so they kept things realistic. They kept their expectations realistic, but they have managed to do very well over the course of a couple of weekends. So that's been great. And I think for some, success may be defined differently. The bakery has still got an income. They were mostly focused on counter service
Sure.
before this. And, so maybe they're not recouping, they're not pulling in the same amount maybe that they were before, but they're pulling in something, and they're still baking, and they're still selling, and they're still out there and relevant in the community. And so maybe success for them at this stage looks like that.
Right. That's wonderful to hear. I want to ask you a quick question. People have been, you've seen a lot of advertisement recently about transitioning your business online, and people are trying to do it themselves, right? We see a lot of advertisement for e-commerce platforms that are coming through both in our email inboxes and then through our social media feeds. And the temptation is, well, I've got the time, I'm home, I'm fairly savvy when it comes to being online. Would you recommend that people get involved with an e-commerce platform on their own, and when should they decide to work with someone like Fisher Green Creative to really up the ante? So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, because I think that it can be very attractive and exciting with as easy as it sounds. But as of course we know as professionals in the digital media space, it is not always as easy as it sounds, and there are a lot of considerations. So I'd love to hear, what's that point of distinction for changing from a do-it-yourselfer to actually hiring a consulting firm?
I think both things are possible as far as do-it-yourself or handing it off and everything in between. Obviously, Frost Farms is doing their own data entry and saving themselves a lot of money on that end. But
You mean
bakery,
they're adding the products themselves and prices and things like that? Okay, perfect.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. They're adding their own variations, that kind of thing. We were able to send out a tutorial and let them know how it works, and they've managed to take it over and do very well. On the other side of that is the bakery that we've been working with. They had their page up before I even knew what was happening, and they were very good. That being said, it's to younger people who are most likely very tech savvy. And they started off with a minimal menu and have been able to expand it. I think you need to ask yourself a couple of questions first. Do you have time?
Right.
And be very well aware of that there is a learning curve for everything. And so also, do you have the patience, and do you have the capacity technically to do it? If you're just figuring out a few basic things about the internet, then it's probably not for you. But if you feel like you can jump around pretty successfully and really have a sort of technological bent, then maybe you can. I would say when you hit a point of frustration, we did have someone hand over their Wix site last week because he was just over it. He was done. He's like, here, just take it. And I feel so much better handing it off, and I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Right.
It's really a different point for everybody. And I think you just have to know yourself well and not expect too much out of yourself. They do make it look very easy. It is not always very easy.
Right.
And that's how we do get a lot of people coming to us who have started and given their best effort on their own and just say, could you please fix this or help me, or various levels of consulting, depending on how far they've gotten and how far they want to go.
Well, I think that that's a really important point. I mean, a lot of these platforms, you can set up your own account. You can integrate with some of your credit card processing on your own. But that maintenance, again, we can't underestimate the amount of time that it actually takes. And it's really nice, especially when we're in something that has such a massive learning curve, to have that helping hand and that guidance for those quick questions. I want to ask you both a quick question, because I know that integrating your e-commerce platform into your social media, because there's a lot of options for online stores and Facebook and Instagram. I had a colleague come to me with a question about that, and maybe Jenny, you can talk about that. How easy is that process to integrate an e-commerce website into your social media?
Pretty straightforward, and I do recommend that integration. We've had a couple questions about selling directly on Facebook. Can I just use Facebook Marketplace? And the short answer is yes, you absolutely can. But you might want to circle back around to some long-term goals, because it would be really nice if we could use this opportunity, in the process of setting up e-commerce, if we can make this a long-term solution. This could go well beyond the pandemic quarantine time. This could be really a really great revenue stream for now and forever. And so we really want to focus on that bigger picture, if at all possible. But in terms of integrating with your social media, absolutely, and that goes back around to, once you have your e-commerce site, you're still going to have to drive traffic to that site, that location, and so that would be the benefit of really pulling in those channels and making sure that everything's working nicely together.
I think that that's a really great point, Jenny, that you make, is that if you're going to do the work to set up a robust e-commerce site, that why not set it up for the long term versus just plugging a hole, right? Putting yourself in a position where it's not just filling an immediate need, but that can become a viable revenue source for you in the long term. I think that's a really important part. And some platforms over others are better at that social media integration, right? I mean, it's one of those things that we've seen. Some have those built-in back-end connections that make it very easy to update inventory on your Facebook shop or your Instagram versus having to go in and do everything manually. So I think it's really important to put yourself in a position where, again, you're having that long-term success. So tell me a little bit about next steps. So that someone's interested, they have a group of products that they can begin to sell. They have some savvy about getting online. What are those next steps for them once they've put all of those initial considerations into place? What would you recommend for them in terms of doing research and getting more information so that they get on the right kind of platform?
I would have them take a look, especially if they're in a brick and mortar store, about the payment processor they're already using, and see what might be available to them, especially if they're tracking inventory that way. Just sort of building a continuation of that same process instead of upending your whole process and starting over.
Got it.
If you already have that in place, I would suggest following that. If you are starting from scratch, I think, ask yourself if you are, I don't know, comfortable taking payment online, or if you would rather it take place elsewhere. It's just how involved and how specific and how customized your site needs to be. If you're happy with a templated solution, then that's great. But
and can you tell, just so I know when we say templated solution, I know that we know what we mean. The public templated solution, what does that mean?
That would be like Square or Wix, something like that, where you sort of choose a template, or Squarespace. You choose a template and you don't have much room for a lot of customization outside of that.
Perfect.
The features that come with that template are the features you have to work with. If you really think that long term you're going to need to build something that's going to grow, I would explore WooCommerce on WordPress. Again, Shopify is somewhat templated, although a little more flexible, depending on if they have their own specific coding language, and so it depends on if you have access to someone who knows that specific language too. But you can also go with Shopify right out of the box too. So it just depends pretty much on where you see this going and how complex you think it might end up being. If you think it's going to be very simple, then begin very simple.
Got it.
With Weebly Square, Weebly, same sort of thing, same company.
Right. One of the things I've noticed is that to make sure that customers do their research in how those platforms can ultimately integrate with their social media. Some platforms do not integrate with social media. And so being careful not to build a site on something, for example, I'll give the example of Weebly, where it does not as easily integrate with social media as some of the other platforms. So you don't want to, and that can be okay for some people, but again, you want to make sure if your customer audience is that Facebook demographic, then you want to make sure that you're using an e-commerce platform that can easily integrate with that demographic. Same thing if you're with Instagram, same kinds of questions. So I think you make a really good point about doing your homework first before you spend the time, because it is a tremendous amount of time that people are going to be spending on this platform and learning it. So that's a great consideration to make.
I would also make one final point. If you ever want to transfer away from the initial platform that you have decided upon, see how easy or difficult it will be. In some cases, you cannot move the site. The site exists there, and there is no way to export it. And those tend to be the less expensive do-it-yourself things like Wix. As far as I know, you can't export a Wix site, but if you have a WordPress site, you can change the theme, you can make customizations to it all day, and it's not going anywhere. I know Wix and Squarespace and all those places are solid enough that they're not going to shut down tomorrow, but if they did, your site would likely go with it.
Right, and that's an important key factor too, is thinking about ownership. And when you have that shop, what are you really owning when you have that online shop? That's a really important consideration too. And I think the kind of expertise and advice, these are the kinds of questions that customers and clients could come to the two of you and talk about and say, here are all the back end considerations. The urgency right now is get my products up, get them on a site and get them selling. It's really important that we take the time to deliberate beforehand before we make that leap, because there are a lot of legal and technical considerations, especially with where the vision is of where you want your store to grow, right? And making sure that you put yourself in that position so that your online footprint can expand and grow as your online business expands. So I think that's a wonderful point. Well, just to recap, and I'm so excited because we are going to have a part 2 of this conversation next week, where we talk a little bit more about once your store is up and running, how to market that store online. And I'm so glad that we've had this initial conversation about e-commerce. Kind of to recap some of the head talking points, one of the things, again, it bears mentioning, really start slow. Start with a small product base that you can build some success around. Make sure that you're looking at potential platforms that can already integrate with your current payment processor. I love that point, because a lot of payment processors have systems that they work with, and it's really important that you're taking care of the inventory that you have so that you don't have 2 different systems, maybe one that's telling you have this amount of inventory and another. So see if there's something that currently integrates with your current payment processing system. Make sure that you are building a site that can grow with your business. So making sure that you're taking the time to make the investment into an e-commerce platform that can expand and potentially even move if you and your business need to move websites. And again, make sure that you are honest with yourself about how much time, about how much tech capacity you have. And you can contact the two of you, right, for a general consultation or even an entire overhaul. Overhaul. Is that correct? So you are open to talking to people and having that hour-long conversation or consultation with them to help guide them in the right direction, right?
Absolutely. We had someone contact us and say, help, our site's broken. And then a couple weeks later, or not a couple weeks, a couple days later, they said, no, I think we have it under control. I'm like, that's totally fine. We're here if you need us. So we definitely want to leave the door open to those who are braving it on their own to get back in touch and ask the occasional question. Is certainly happy to fill that service for people as well.
I think that that's hugely important too. I think that many of us just want to be able to have that guiding hand, to have someone maybe audit the work that we do and really make sure that we're pointed in the right direction, because this is a huge part of our livelihoods as small business owners, and it's really nice to have that expert advice. Just, Jenny, I want to close out with the thought that you mentioned. I really appreciated too, during this process, this is a learning and growing process for all small business owners, and it's so nice to be able to openly communicate with your community about where you are. And I really appreciate that idea about having your messaging across your website, your email list, and your social media channels. I think that's such an important part, and I really appreciate you echoing that sentiment that you can communicate with your customers. And of course, the more that you do communicate, the more success that this e-commerce transition will have for your business. So thank you both so much for sharing your expertise today. I really appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
So
Thank you so much.
where can people find out more about Fisher Green Creative?
You can go to our website, fishergreencreative.com, or feel free to email us at info@fishergreencreative.com.
Wonderful. So I'm going to post that information in the link in the comments here, as well as in the video description. I really appreciate you tuning in today to our conversation about e-commerce. If you have specific questions about e-commerce, don't hesitate to leave them in the comments below, or reach out to the team at Fisher Green Creative for a consultation. They'd be more than happy to help you. We look forward to seeing you here next week as well for part 2 of our conference. Like 2 minutes, 2 seconds. I feel like I'm dating myself when I say that. It's like the old dating game. But I look forward to sharing more about how to market your business once you are up on e-commerce. Kathy, Jenny, thank you both so much. I really appreciate your expertise, and we really look forward to helping you all in our community elevate your business, keep on with successful growth, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.